Reading picture books aloud is a staple of every preschool experience and every early elementary classroom. We use picture books to teach literacy, but so much more. We teach about counting, colors, shapes, science, social studies, relationship skills, emotional development, everything. So how do we move story time from being the circle of kids on the floor surrounding a teacher with books and a felt board to an online classroom format, like Zoom or Teams? There are several options we can consider. I'll start with the simplest, lowest tech version, just holding a book up to the camera and reading. Let's look at how we can optimize that experience. Then we'll look at ebooks. You just bring up the ebook on your device, share your screen, and then the kids will get a great view of the book while you read. You can make your own video, or you can find hundreds of online videos of children's books being read aloud. I mute the narrator and I read it in my own voice. Or you can take pictures of the book and assemble them in a slideshow. That can lead to the best result, but it's also the most work. Let's look at those options in detail. In terms of technology skills, the easiest answer is to hold a book in your hands and read it. If you figured out how to attend a Zoom meeting and unmute yourself, you have all the tech savvy you need for this. I made my video on Zoom about this, so you can see exactly what the students might see. The easiest way to share a children's book on Zoom is simply to share a children's book on Zoom, to hold up the book and read it to the children. And that can work really effectively as long as you've got a physical copy of book in the house. You do also want to think about some things though in order to make that the best possible experience. One thing to think about is what's your lighting, making sure that you've got good lighting available. The better your screen image, the better. I purposely today have kind of a little bit of a blurry image. You can see it would be better if I was on a higher bandwidth and so you could see kind of everything a little bit crisper, but let's play with what happens when we don't have the best computer connection, but it's adequate. So I first want to do all the things I want to normally think about, kind of how do I make my camera image as good as possible? How do I make a sound as good as possible so it's easy to hear me? Once I've gone through those steps, then I want to think about what books to share. And some things we want to think about is not just what we've always considered, right? We've always considered what's our favorite book, what's fun to read, what ties into our storyline. But we also honestly need to think about a couple things like how heavy is the book, how shiny is the book, how big are the words, because that's going to really affect the visual experience online. Okay, so I love this book, but it's heavy, right? It's heavy, it's shiny. It also combines multiple pages on the multiple pages of the story onto the same page of the book. So I find that just these 4 pages of Chicka Chicka Boom Boom end up just being really busy and hard for the kids to keep track of. You'll also notice I have to kind of hold this in front of my face so you don't see me, probably don't hear me as well once I've got it up there. And with the shininess and the small letters, it's just hard for this to be a good experience. So much as I love this book, I'm not going to use it during online circle time. Rather than that hardcover book, it's easier to have a nice lightweight soft cover. I've still got a couple issues with this one. It's a little bit big. Obviously there are bigger books, but this one's still a little bit big. And when I open up the pages, some of them show up pretty well. Right? There's some glossiness, but at least I've got a good contrast on the picture, good size of words. But then some of the scenes in this are about what the animals are up to in the nighttime. And so those darker pages with that glossiness on them just don't work as effectively. So I may still read Farmer Duck because I love Farmer Duck, but I might use another option, such as taking pictures of the pages or making a video or using a video instead of trying to hold it up and show that to you. So Dinosaur Roar is more effective just because the colors are stronger, so contrast is higher, and it's got great big words. Although it's still got the glossy pages and I still have to figure out how to lean around it, it's going to be easier to see than Farmer Duck was. But much better than paperback books, honestly, if you have them and you're working with younger kids, is to go to the board book option. Board books, because they're stiff, they're lightweight, they're small, they're a lot easier to manage. I can also hold it down low enough so you can still see part of my face and I don't have to kind of dive around it quite as much. And it's important for the children to be able to see our faces as we're working to build those relationships with them. So using something like the Very Hungry Caterpillar, we've got good close-up views of it. It's easy to manage our way through all the pages. They can still see those fun, like, the apple with the bite through it, the pears. If there's something I want to show them up close, engage them more. I might say on Saturday, they ate through, right? And I can move it up closer. I have the one piece of chocolate cake, one ice cream cone, one, what's that? Oh, right, a pickle, right? So I can still kind of take advantage of some things I'd see do in a classroom, and actually they've got a better view of this book than online than they would have had in my classroom. I like lift the flap books always, and just like in person, they're more engaging than just a plain book. Online, they're more engaging. So I like them. The fact that this is a board book means it's easy for me to hold and support the book while still being able to manipulate the pages and work my way through that board book with the kids. So every once in a while you have a weird book that, there's just something unusual about, and you want to make sure that you've tested it as well. I love this book. It's the Polka Dot Old MacDonald Had a Farm. And after you sing the verse about with a cluck, cluck here, cluck, cluck there, then we're going to count the numbers of chickens. And every time we count one, we pop that bubble. 1, 2, 3, that one's already popped. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I really like using this in person because the kids really like to pop those bubbles. But I thought even online it would be fun to have that because that additional sound adds a new level of interest for the kids. But I needed to test it with my microphone to make sure that was going to pick up. Okay, so if you have physical books and you're kind of a little intimidated by doing anything more technologically savvy than that, this is obviously an easy place to start. Just a couple things to think about to make it the most successful it can be. You can make this experience look better by making sure you have a good internet connection, your video image is clear and well lit, and your mic picks up the sound well. You can find a tutorial on my blog at janelledurham.com. Another option for physical books is to call into your Zoom meeting on a second device like your phone and set it up like a document camera so the kids can see the book well. I have instructions for how to do that on my blog. If you have an ebook, then you read it on the device that you use for Zoom and share your screen so children can see the book while you read it aloud. It's easy and it offers a great clear view of the book. You could buy Kindle ebooks from Amazon, of course, but there are also several libraries of online children's ebooks available. You may have free access through your local library or school district. For example, in Kirkland, Washington, we can access Libby, Hoopla, Tumble Book Library, and Bookflix through the library, and access Sora through our public schools. Check with your local library to see if you can do that. Some apps also have paid options which are covered on their websites. For example, check out Epic Books. Here is a sample of what that ebook experience looks like.
Some Native Americans believe the world was held on the backs of 7 turtles. And when the turtles moved, earthquake! Yeah. The Japanese once believed that a huge catfish lived deep inside the earth. And when it thrashed about, the earth shook.
If you know how to share a screen on Zoom or Teams, then you can share a video of a children's book. If the video is good quality, children generally get a better view of the book using this method than they do with you holding a book up to the camera. There are tons of YouTube videos with people reading picture books. So whatever book you want to share with them, just try searching for it on YouTube using the keywords read aloud. So for example, you can search for Goodnight Moon read aloud and you will find many examples. They range a lot in quality, so be sure to preview anything you're considering using. Now you could play the video with the audio narration by whoever made it, but I personally would rather have my students hear my voice and build a relationship with me than hearing some random person's voice. The only time I use the video with the narration on is if it's something special. For example, the author of the book reading it aloud, or this one, which is an astronaut reading a book about astronauts from the International Space Station.
If I were an astronaut, I would fly a spacecraft in outer space. If I were an astronaut, I would feel the G's. Gravity would pin me to my seat as I blasted off. My arms and legs would feel like concrete as I rose into space. And that's true. You watch how she's being pinned back in her seat. That's exactly what we felt when we launched on board the spacecraft. It felt like something pushing on our chest and holding us back into the seat. That's how powerful the rocket is. If I were an astronaut, I would dock my ship to the space station. I would gently settle the shuttle into place. Be careful. Lighten up on the thrusters.
I have a strong preference for playing the video with the volume muted and narrating it myself or having my co-teacher narrate it. Here's an example of what that looks and sounds like.
There he was! Mom! I yelled. It was a Triceratops! What? Cried my mom. She did not look happy. How are we supposed to get that home? The bakery lady smiled. Oh, don't worry, he'll follow you. And he did, all the way to the doctor's office where I had to go for my checkup. My mom shook her head. What are we going to do with him now? She looked him up and down. That took a while. We can't bring him inside, she said finally. He'll have to stay in the parking lot.
This generally works very well, but you definitely want to practice with the video in advance, because sometimes the narrator reads more slowly or more quickly than you normally would, or sometimes they stop to point out something on a page. Here's an example of where I messed this one up. The narrator paused at the end of a page, so I tried to quickly name all the planets to fill the gap in time. And then you see their finger pointing out each of the planets one by one as I stalled. Oops. Earth, where we live, is a planet. Earth orbits around the sun. The sun and its planets make up your solar system. So remember we learned last week about Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. And this picture also shows Pluto. And we told you last week that Pluto is actually now considered a dwarf planet.
Excuse me?
The person here is pointing out the person who made this video is pointing out all the different planets that we just talked about. You could also pre-record your own video if you'd rather do that than do a live reading during class. Set your camera on a tripod or jerry-rig a document camera with your phone and make sure your lighting and sound are good. Then you film as you read the book, flipping through the pages as you do. Then edit the video as needed so it's ready to go. To share the video, you could just have YouTube or your video set up on your computer ready to go. And when the time comes, just share your screen and read aloud. I personally don't like to show directly off YouTube because you can accidentally show an ad, and it's also hard to have a video on YouTube or your desktop queued up to exactly the right spot. I really prefer to have a PowerPoint with all my materials for class, including the video, all set up just perfectly. So all I have to do is share the PowerPoint and I don't need to juggle in and out of different programs. I have a tutorial about how to set up a PowerPoint on my blog. If you have a physical copy of the book, you could also take a picture of each page, then paste the pictures onto slides in a PowerPoint or Canva or Google Slides or whatever. Then during class, share the PowerPoint. Here's a sample book. The moon rose fat and white. Its light fell through James's window, making a square on the wall. A breeze blew the curtain, flip, flap, making shadows. They rustled. I want you guys to look on the wall next to James, and you see a shape on the wall of a shadow. To James, the shadows looked like monsters. Mommy, Daddy, yelled James because he was so scared because he thought he saw monsters in his room. And his parents came running and they said, "Those were only curtain shadows," said Mama. "Please, please make them go away," James said. So Daddy pinned the curtains back and the monster shadows went away. There are some advantages to the slideshow method. You can get really crisp, clear photos. You can edit out a few pages if the book is too long for your purposes. You completely control the timing. I like to engage my students in some books asking questions like, "Can you see the duckling? Where is it?" Or, "How many puppies do you see? Can we count them together?" And that works better with these slideshows than it does when I try to pause and unpause a video for those interactions. The downside of the slideshow method is that it's more work than any other method. There's one important way you can speed up the work. Instead of using your phone's photo app to take the pictures, use a scanner app like Office Lens. It will save you a great deal of time. If you use your camera to take a picture of a page or book, then you have to crop the image to get rid of irrelevant background, and also the images tend to have a keystone effect, where the top of the page looks wider than the bottom of the page. Office Lens will fix keystoning and do the cropping for you. These are samples of some pictures I took with my regular camera versus the pictures I took using Office Lens. Both were taken from the same angle with the same amount of time and effort put into snapping the picture. One of the nice things about making a slideshow is that you can supplement it. I've interspersed demos between pages of books. I've added videos of real caterpillars hatching and real butterflies on pages next to images from Very Hungry Caterpillar. I added samples of what instruments sound like into this book about the orchestra, something I've never had the opportunity to do during an in-person class. Violin. Players with like instruments sit together in families. The violin belongs to the string family, along with the viola, the cello, and the big string bass. You play all of these with a bow or pluck them with your fingers. The The violin is the smallest of the string instruments. Its song can be as bright as laughter, light as air, soft as a whisper, or sad as a tear. What about copyright? Copyright is complicated. What you're reading affects it. Some books may be out of copyright. Some may have publisher permissions that allow you to read it. How you are using the book matters. Just reading the book with no other material is more likely to violate copyright than if you are using the book in a transformative way to support a specific lesson. Where you are reading the book can matter. Reading a book in a live lesson to 10 kids in a nonprofit program is different than reading it to students in a class on a for-profit platform like OutSchool. And that is different than creating a monetized video to put on YouTube. I am not an expert on this, and I encourage you to do your own research. I've included some links in my blog post on this topic. On that post, you'll also find links to more tutorials for running any kind of event, meeting, or class on Zoom. My tutorials include information on making music work well, games you can play on Zoom, and ways to engage young children in online classes. Almost every teacher I know would rather be in the physical classroom with our students. But for as long as online learning is happening, let's do all we can to make our classes as fun, engaging, and educational as possible for these kids.